It was just past 8 a.m. on a chilly Thursday morning when Thomas Gray quietly pushed open the door of a downtown diner. The bell overhead gave a lazy jingle, but nobody looked up. He didn't expect them to. Dressed in a weathered army green jacket and worn jeans, Thomas blended into the margins, the kind of man people glance at once and quickly forget. He made his way to a corner stool at the counter. No menu needed. He'd order the same thing he always did, 1 cup of black coffee, no refills. He didn't want to burden the staff. He just wanted somewhere warm to sit for a while. The waitress, Marla, spotted him from behind the counter and hesitated. She wasn't unkind, but she'd been warned, several times, not to let that man linger too long. Customers had complained. A few had walked out. Management had grown strict. Still, she approached with a forced smile. "The usual Thomas?" she asked. He nodded politely. "If it's not too much trouble." She poured the coffee, setting it down with a sigh. "You're good," she said softly. "Just try not to stay too long today, all right?" Thomas gave a small smile, eyes tired but kind. "I'll be gone before the rush." But rush hour came early. The front door swung open with force. 2 police officers stepped inside, boots loud on the tile. Officers Jenkins and Davis, names known well in the area, especially among the city's black and brown communities. They weren't here for a crime. They were here for control. Their eyes landed on Thomas almost instantly. Jenkins smirked. Well, guess breakfast is on the house if you wear enough holes in your shoes," he said loudly. Davis chuckled. "Or maybe he's just here casing the joint. That it, old man? You planning a robbery in slow motion?" The room went quiet. Conversation stopped. Forks paused midair. Marla froze behind the counter, eyes wide with discomfort. Thomas didn't move. He simply lifted the coffee to his lips, took a sip and set it back down. "I'm just having a coffee," he said, voice calm. "Not bothering anyone." "Oh, but see, you're the bother," Jenkins replied, stepping closer. "People don't feel safe with you around." "No one said a word to me," Thomas replied. "Doesn't matter. We're saying it now." A few people looked away, pretending to read menus. Others lowered their eyes. No one spoke up. No one wanted to be next. Jenkins reached toward the duffel bag sitting beside Thomas's stool. "What's in the bag, huh? Contraband? Stolen goods?" Thomas gripped the strap before he could grab it. "Don't touch that." Davis moved closer, his voice sharper. "You resisting now?" Thomas met his gaze. "No. Just telling you, you don't want to do this." Jenkins laughed. "Oh, I think I do." But what the officers didn't know, what nobody in that diner could have guessed, was that Thomas Gray wasn't just another face on the street. And with one phone call, he was about to remind everyone exactly who he was. Because that call wasn't to a lawyer. It wasn't to a local news station. It was to the one person who had the power to turn the tables and destroy both officers' careers before their next cup of coffee. The tension thickened as Officer Jenkins placed a hand on Thomas's shoulder. It wasn't violent, yet, but it was enough to make every pair of eyes in the diner lock onto them. Thomas didn't flinch, but his grip on the coffee cup tightened. "You need to leave," Jenkins said. "We're not asking again." Marla stepped forward, her voice trembling. "He hasn't done anything. He paid for his coffee, he always does. He just sits there quietly." "Did we ask you?" Davis snapped, eyes narrowing at her. "This isn't your concern." "But it is," Marla insisted, voice growing stronger. "This is my section. He's not causing a disturbance." Jenkins ignored her completely. "Let's go, old man. Outside. Now." Thomas slowly rose from his seat. The entire diner seemed to hold its breath. He reached down calmly and picked up his duffel bag. There was no anger in his face, only quiet calculation, like a man measuring his next move carefully, like a man who had seen this all before. As they escorted him toward the exit, Thomas spoke, low and even. "I'm giving you one chance to stop this now." Davis laughed. "Stop what?" "Enforcing the law." "No," Thomas replied. "Making the biggest mistake of your careers." He pulled a phone from his coat pocket. The model looked old, almost out of place, like something from another decade. He unlocked it with practiced ease and scrolled to a name marked simply, Command. "You're bluffing," Jenkins sneered. Thomas pressed the call button and held the phone to his ear. "Gray here," he said when the line picked up. "Patch me through to the secretary." Silence. Then a crackle. A voice came through, crisp, formal, and instantly commanding. "Stand by, Colonel." "Colonel." Jenkins and Davis blinked. It was the first time they seemed unsure of themselves. Within seconds, a woman's voice replaced the first. Calm. Controlled. Powerful. Colonel Gray? Are you safe? Yes, ma'am. I'm in a diner downtown. Local PD is detaining me without cause. What's the name of the precinct? District 12. Officers Jenkins and Davis. There was a pause on the line. A deadly pause. They'll be contacted immediately. Stay on the line, Colonel. Military police are en route. Thomas lowered the phone and looked the officers dead in the eye. You had your chance. Davis swallowed hard. Colonel? What is this, some kind of joke? No joke, Thomas replied. 3 tours in Afghanistan. 1 in Syria. Bronze Star. Joint Special Operations. You just manhandled the wrong man. By now, several customers had pulled out their phones, recording everything. The entire diner felt like a powder keg ready to explode. Marla stepped forward again, voice shaking but firm. You didn't know, did you? He's been coming here for months. He's never said a word about his past. Never acted better than anyone. Just sat quietly, and you treated him like trash. Outside, the wail of sirens began to rise. Jenkins turned pale. Davis stepped back. Thomas finished his coffee in one smooth sip. You wanted a show? It's about to start. The screech of tires sliced through the morning air as a pair of matte black SUVs rolled up outside the diner. Out stepped 2 men in tailored suits, their demeanor cold and efficient. A third followed, wearing a military police uniform, flanked by a woman with a briefcase and a headset tucked neatly into one ear. The door chimed as they entered, and the entire diner went still, again. Colonel Gray? The man in uniform asked, scanning the room. Thomas simply raised a hand in acknowledgement. The uniformed man gave a sharp nod. We've been informed. Please come with us. You're under the protection of the Department of Defense now. Thank you, Sergeant, Thomas said evenly, rising once more. But then he turned, gaze settling back on Jenkins and Davis. Not so fast. These men need to stay. The man with the briefcase stepped forward now, addressing the officers. You 2 have been identified by name in a federal complaint filed moments ago. You are hereby ordered to remain on site for formal questioning. Internal Affairs and JAG investigators have been dispatched. I'd advise you to sit down. Davis looked as though he might faint. Jenkins opened his mouth as if to argue but said nothing. Their badges suddenly felt like paper. Their guns like toys. Someone in the back whispered, "He really is military." Another added, "I saw this on live stream. It's all over TikTok." Outside, a growing crowd had started to gather. People who had seen the diner clip go viral within minutes. Local news vans were already arriving, anchoring their cameras on the entrance like it was the scene of a national event. Thomas walked to the counter, slowly, purposefully. He placed 2 crumpled $5 bills on it and turned to Marla. Thanks for the coffee. She smiled through misty eyes. Come back any time, Colonel. As Thomas walked out with the MPs, the 2 officers were left behind, now seated and handcuffed to the booth they'd once stood so confidently in. Jenkins looked down at his boots. Davis couldn't meet anyone's eyes. The man with the briefcase turned to the remaining patrons. If anyone has footage or witnessed what happened, please submit your name and contact to our team outside. This incident will be fully reviewed under federal jurisdiction. Whispers filled the room, but there was no panic, only awe. Meanwhile, inside one of the black SUVs, Thomas sat quietly as the vehicle pulled away. Sir, the sergeant beside him said. You didn't have to call her directly. You could have filed a report. Thomas looked out the window. I've spent years letting things slide. I've watched good people get crushed because they were taught to stay quiet. Not today. The sergeant nodded in deep respect. Understood. Thomas closed his eyes for a moment, letting the sunlight pour through the window. He wasn't angry anymore. He wasn't even surprised. He was just tired of being invisible, tired of watching people like Jenkins and Davis walk over those they deemed lesser. But not today. Today he reminded the world who he was. And they'd never forget again. Hours later, in a crisp government office, Colonel Thomas Gray sat across from a woman in a navy blue suit. Her badge read, Internal Affairs, Department of Justice. She had sharp eyes but a calm demeanor. Colonel Gray, she began, tapping her pen against a notepad, we've confirmed your identity and military status. Your service record is extraordinary. Thomas nodded modestly. You served 3 tours overseas. Bronze Star. Purple Heart. And according to this, she flipped a page, you headed a covert unit specializing in critical extraction and high-risk negotiation. Yes, ma'am. She leaned back. And now you're living on the streets of Detroit, frequenting diners for a quiet cup of coffee. I go where I'm left alone. Or used to, he replied. She paused. What happened in that diner today? Wasn't your first experience with targeted harassment, was it? Thomas shook his head. No. But it was the first time someone pulled a gun on me for ordering coffee. The woman glanced at the footage again. Her monitor showed the diner scene from multiple angles, captured by witnesses now pieced together. Jenkins and Davis stood clearly, looming over Thomas. Their words were unmistakable. So was their tone. The officer scribbled something down. You made a call to General Monroe. That caught our attention fast. Thomas met her eyes. She was my commanding officer. And a friend. I figured if the people who swore to protect citizens were the ones doing harm, maybe the people who trained them needed to know. She smiled faintly. Well, you did more than shake the tree, Colonel. You brought down the whole branch. Meanwhile, back in Detroit, the fallout had begun. Jenkins and Davis had been suspended without pay, pending full investigation. The police chief, already under scrutiny for previous misconduct, was issuing damage control statements that reeked of desperation. News outlets ran non-stop coverage of the diner disgrace, as it was now called. Clips of Thomas standing tall, composed, and dignified against two aggressive officers had become symbols of resistance and justice across social media. Hashtags like #Colonel Gray, #DinerJustice, and #SaluteTheVet were trending. Marla, the diner waitress, was interviewed on local TV. She wiped away tears as she recounted the moment. I've served that man coffee every day for over a year. Never asked for anything. Always polite. Never caused trouble. And those cops, they didn't even ask who he was. They just saw his skin, his clothes, and they decided he wasn't worth respect. An anchor asked her, do you know who he really is? Marla nodded. Doesn't matter who he was. It matters who he is. Back at the office, the DOJ agent closed her folder. We'll be recommending commendation for how you handled yourself, Colonel. And we'd like to offer you a role in training seminars, real stories from real heroes. Thomas raised an eyebrow. You want me to be the poster child for what happens when the system works? No, she said seriously. We want you to help fix the system. Thomas stood. I'll think about it. As he walked out, something in him shifted. For the first time in years, he wasn't just surviving. He was being seen. Not for the uniform he wore once, but for the man he still was. And this time the world was listening. The streets of Detroit were no quieter the next morning, but something felt different. Thomas could sense it in the way people looked at him as he walked down the sidewalk, his steps slow but sure. No longer just the homeless guy with the black duffel bag. Now people nodded respectfully. Some even saluted. As he reached the diner, he hesitated for a second. A news van was parked outside. Cameras were still lingering from the day before. He wasn't interested in fame, but the truth had already found its way into the world. Marla was wiping the counter when she spotted him. She beamed. Thomas? You're back. He gave a humble nod. Didn't want to leave without saying thank you. Marla poured him a fresh cup of coffee and leaned in. Thank you. I've seen a lot happen in this place, but what you did, you gave people hope. You reminded them that dignity matters. He sipped the coffee, then pulled out a small notepad. Scribbled on it were notes, names, dates, phone numbers. All people he'd helped once in the service. Soldiers. Families. One name had a star next to it. I've been thinking, he said, maybe it's time I stop hiding in corners. Maybe I can still make a difference. From behind the counter, a young man approached. He was no older than 20, dressed in jeans and a hoodie, clearly nervous. Sir, I just wanted to say thank you, the kid stammered. I saw what happened on the news. My brother's a Marine. He told me you were a legend. Said your unit saved his convoy in Kandahar. Thomas raised an eyebrow, surprised. What's his name? Jared Holman. Thomas broke into a rare smile. Holman, the medic? I pulled him out of a burning vehicle. The kid grinned wide. He said you were like a ghost. Nobody believed you existed. Until now. More people entered the diner, some quietly greeting Thomas, others just watching from afar. He wasn't used to this attention. But it wasn't celebrity. It was recognition. Not far away, Jenkins and Davis were facing internal hearings. Their records were now open to public scrutiny. Unsealed complaints, unresolved citizen reports, and disciplinary actions suddenly couldn't be buried. Meanwhile, General Monroe appeared on a national news broadcast, speaking carefully but powerfully. We cannot allow heroes to become invisible. Colonel Gray was failed not just by a few officers, but by a culture that forgets its promises. We must hold people accountable for abusing their authority, regardless of badge or rank. The reporter asked, "And where is Colonel Gray now?" Monroe smiled. "Where he's always been, among the people. You just didn't notice." Thomas left the diner and walked into the nearest community center. He stepped up to the front desk. "How do I volunteer?" he asked. The young woman blinked. "Volunteer? I want to mentor veterans. Anyone who's been forgotten." She pulled out a form, clearly stunned. "We don't get a lot of people like you in here." "That's the problem," Thomas said, pen in hand. By the end of the day, Thomas Gray, once invisible, had signed up to speak at 3 schools, mentor 2 at-risk teens, and co-lead a workshop for struggling veterans transitioning out of homelessness. One phone call had exposed injustice. But Thomas? He was ready to do more than just expose it. He was ready to rebuild. The ripple effect of Thomas's phone call didn't just end with media attention and hearings. It triggered a chain of revelations that reached every corner of the city. Citizens began sharing stories online, encounters they had with the same officers, Jenkins and Davis. Traffic stops that turned hostile, intimidation without cause, and complaints that mysteriously vanished. Suddenly, the city couldn't pretend anymore. At the mayor's office, urgent meetings were called. Policies around police conduct were hastily reviewed. Public pressure grew. The city's chief of police was forced to hold a press conference. "I want to be clear," the chief stated stiffly, "no one is above the law. Every complaint against officers Jenkins and Davis will be re-evaluated. We are initiating a department-wide review, starting today." Back at the diner, Thomas sat at a corner table, reading from a stack of letters delivered just for him. Some came from veterans he'd once commanded. Others were from strangers who saw his story and simply wanted to say, "Thank you. We see you." Marla approached him with a grin. "You've got mail from all over the country. Looks like you're becoming a symbol." "I didn't ask for that," Thomas said, folding one letter and sliding it into his coat pocket. "No. But sometimes symbols choose us." Later that evening, as twilight fell over the city, Thomas found himself walking toward a modest building with a rusted sign, "Veterans Shelter, Closed." He stopped, stared at it. His reflection flickered in the glass. He stepped back, pulled out his phone and dialed. "Monroe." "General," Thomas said, "I want to do more. There's a shelter here that could be reopened. I know guys out there, guys like me, who don't need charity. They need a fighting chance. A mission." Monroe didn't hesitate. "Send me the address. I'll handle the rest." The next week, donations began pouring in. Monroe made a personal contribution. Veterans from Thomas's old unit flew in from across the country to help renovate. A local nonprofit pledged support. Even a few officers from the force, those who believed in true service, volunteered to clean, paint, and cook. And Thomas? He worked from morning till night, cleaning bathrooms, painting walls, organizing cots. People offered to help, but he insisted on doing most of it himself. "You can't build something for the forgotten," he said, "unless you've walked in their shoes." By the end of the week, the sign out front had changed. Colonel Thomas Gray Community Center for Veterans and Families. A ribbon-cutting ceremony was held, but Thomas refused to speak on stage. Instead, he stood in the crowd, hands in his pockets, quietly watching a group of kids playing basketball in the lot next door. One of the kids ran up to him. "Are you really a colonel?" Thomas smiled. "Used to be. Can I be one too?" He kneeled down to the boy's eye level. "You don't need stripes to be a leader. Just courage." For the first time in years, Thomas felt something he hadn't let himself feel: peace. Not because justice had been served, but because hope had been restored. And this time no one could take that from him. The day after the community center officially opened, a black SUV pulled up quietly outside. A woman in a tailored suit stepped out, followed by a cameraman and 2 reporters. Word had spread that Colonel Thomas Gray had done the impossible, transformed a shuttered building into a sanctuary for forgotten heroes, funded not by government grants, but by the gratitude of those who had served with him and the community who now revered him. But Thomas didn't want a spotlight. So, when the cameras arrived, he was in the back room fixing a broken bunk bed. Marla had to drag him out, wiping paint off his hands. "You've got visitors," she said with a grin. "And they're not here for pancakes." Thomas stepped outside, blinking under the bright camera lights. "Colonel Gray," the woman reporter began, "the world saw what happened to you at that diner. And now they're seeing what you've built from it. How do you feel, knowing you've turned a moment of humiliation into a movement?" He paused, looking past the cameras toward the street, where two young men were unloading boxes of donated clothes, and an elderly veteran with a cane was helping a teenage boy fold blankets. "I didn't build a movement," he said slowly. "I just did what any soldier would do when his people are left behind: you go back for them." The footage went viral. Again. And this time it wasn't just national media. International headlines picked up his story: "Veteran turned away becomes beacon of hope." Late-night hosts made tributes. Influencers started fundraisers. A tech billionaire even pledged to open similar centers across the country in Thomas's name. But perhaps the most unexpected visitor came 3 days later. Officer Jenkins. He didn't come in uniform. He came in jeans and a plain black hoodie, shoulders slumped, eyes hollow. Thomas saw him from across the room and didn't flinch. He was serving soup to a long line of vets when Jenkins approached. "I'm not here to defend myself," Jenkins said quietly. I saw the press. And I wanted to say I was wrong." Thomas didn't say anything. He continued ladling soup into a bowl, handed it off, then looked Jenkins square in the eyes. "You didn't see a man that day," Thomas said. "You saw a threat. A problem. Something to move along." "I know," Jenkins said. "I was trained to react, but never taught to see. I resigned from the force." There was a long pause. Thomas finally said, "So what are you now?" "I don't know." Thomas gestured toward the sink full of dirty dishes. "Start there." Jenkins looked confused. "What? You want to change?" Thomas said. "Then grab a sponge. This place runs on humility." Without a word, Jenkins walked to the sink and got to work. No cameras. No audience. Just a man trying to make things right. That night, Marla found Thomas sitting alone outside on the steps. "You didn't have to let him in," she said. "I know," Thomas replied. "But if I turned him away, I'd be no different." She sat beside him. "So what now?" He looked up at the stars. "Now, we serve. We heal. We keep going." And inside, the lights of the center stayed on, warm, constant, a lighthouse for every soul drifting in the dark. The weeks that followed brought a steady stream of people through the doors of the Veteran Center. Some came to volunteer. Others came to heal. But many came to simply shake Thomas's hand, to thank the man who turned injustice into purpose. Despite the praise, Thomas remained grounded. He still woke up before dawn. Still swept the floors himself. Still offered his bed when the center ran out of room. And every day he found time to sit with someone new, someone broken, lost, or forgotten, offering what he'd once been denied: dignity. One afternoon, Marla rushed into the center, breathless and holding an envelope. "You're not going to believe this," she said, waving the letter. "It's from the governor." Thomas raised an eyebrow. "Another award?" "No," she said, grinning. "A meeting. A real one. He wants your help designing a statewide veteran outreach program. Based on this place." Thomas took the letter, read it slowly, and said nothing for a moment. Then he folded it carefully and placed it on the desk. "You'll go, right?" Marla asked. "I'll think about it," he replied. "I didn't build this to impress suits in high places." "No," she said. "You built this so others wouldn't feel invisible. That's exactly why they want you." Before he could respond, a commotion stirred at the front door. A teenage girl stood there nervously, holding a folded-up blanket and a backpack that looked far too heavy for her small frame. Her eyes darted across the room before landing on Thomas. Is this the place where no one gets turned away?" she asked quietly. Thomas stood and walked toward her. "It is now." She burst into tears. They brought her in, gave her food, clean clothes, a room to rest in. Later she shared her story: an abusive stepfather, a runaway bus ride, nights sleeping in parks. She hadn't eaten in 2 days before someone at the train station gave her directions to the center. As she spoke, Thomas listened carefully and then, without hesitation, he offered her what no one else had: safety. That night, after the guests had all gone to sleep, Thomas and Marla stood near the window, watching the rain come down outside. "You know what the craziest part of all this is?" Marla asked. Thomas looked over. "What?" "That all of this, every life you've touched, started because 2 cops tried to throw you out of a diner." Thomas chuckled softly. "Life has a strange way of turning tests into testimony." "Do you ever regret how it started?" she asked. He was quiet for a long time before he answered. "No," he said finally. "If humiliation is what it took to get me here, then I'd live that moment again." Marla nodded slowly. "You think they ever think about it?" "The officers." "I hope they do," Thomas said. "Not out of shame, but because it's never too late to do better. Just then the front door creaked open. Jenkins walked in, hair damp from the rain, holding a tray of hot coffee. "I made some for the night crew," he said sheepishly. Thomas smiled and took a cup. "Look at that," he said to Marla. "Maybe redemption starts with caffeine." They all laughed. And in that small, quiet center lit by faith and second chances, they kept going, proving that a single act of grace, even from the lowest place, could shake the highest walls. Sometimes, the people society tries to erase are the ones it ends up needing most. Thomas didn't just stand up for himself that day in the diner. He stood up for every silent voice, every weary heart, every forgotten soul left to survive in the cracks of the world. He could have made that one call to punish the cops. But instead he used it to build something greater. A place where no badge, no title, no uniform could determine a person's worth. And in doing so he turned disgrace into legacy. Thomas never asked for fame. He didn't chase revenge. He chose impact. And now, years later, that veteran center has become more than just a shelter. It's a symbol of resilience, of mercy, of the power one person still holds, even when they seem to have nothing at all. The irony? Those two officers were stripped of their badges within weeks. One tried to file for early retirement, the other attempted to quietly move to another city. But the story followed them. Their names became cautionary tales in police departments across the country, how a single act of cruelty caught on camera and exposed by character could cost you everything. Meanwhile, Thomas's name echoed in places they never dreamed of. In classrooms teaching empathy. In town halls shaping policy. Even in Congress, where his story was read aloud as part of a bill on protecting homeless veterans. But for Thomas, none of that mattered more than the girl he saw at the center last week, the same runaway teen from months ago, now smiling, stronger, studying for her GD and calling him Uncle T. That was the legacy. And maybe, just maybe, that's what we all need to remember. That kindness doesn't need a spotlight. Courage doesn't need an audience. And sometimes, the smallest gestures, like staying calm when the world is trying to humiliate you, can change the course of hundreds of lives. So what would you have done, if you were Thomas? Would you have let anger guide you? Or would you have chosen something higher? Because the truth is, we're all just one moment away from becoming someone's hero, or someone's regret. Thank you for watching this story on Twilight Tales. If it moved you, inspired you, or simply made you pause for a moment, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more powerful, real, and unforgettable stories. And drop a comment below. We'd love to hear what you think. Do you believe one person can still change the world? Until next time, keep your heart open. Keep your eyes wide. And never underestimate the quiet ones.